I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KrisAnne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KrisAnne Hall Show. KrisAnne Hall here, KrisAnnehall.com, where we are always liberty over security, principle over party, and truth over your favorite personality. We're going to talk about some important things today. There seems to be a great deal of confusion about who is your sheriff and what is his authority. And I think in order for us to really understand the proper role and the proper duties of the sheriff, once again, we need to go back through history, because nothing is made in a vacuum. And the sheriff has a very, very deep and interesting history that helps us understand exactly how all of this works. See, our framers didn't invent sheriffs. And the duty of the sheriff, although has changed over the centuries, the changes in and of themselves are extremely telling of the role and the duty of the sheriff. The sheriff is not an elected employee, is not a paid employee of the city or of the county. The sheriff is an elected representative of the people. He is the chief defender of the rights and the liberties of the people. And the historical transformation of the sheriff shows us a very important aspect of the sheriff that we have simply forgotten. Whereas it may be, arguably, the role of the police chief and his employees to simply follow the laws and enforce the laws as they are paid by the government. That is not the role of the sheriff. It is not the role of the sheriff to say, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm just enforcing the laws. It is not my job to determine which laws to follow and which to not follow. No, historically, yes, it is. As you are not a hireling of the government, but a representative of the people who has taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. An oath to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And the sheriff is one of the most critically important areas in the duty to protect Americans' liberty and the liberty of our posterity. And one of the chiefest of ways that your sheriff can do that is to guard the sovereignty of the state. He has a responsibility, or she, rather, has a responsibility to ensure that the federal government is not transgressing its limited boundaries. That's the whole I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States thing. You see, if you are not preventing the federal government from assuming powers not delegated, then you are not supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States. See, we sometimes think that, supporting the Constitution of the United States is reading your Constitution or, knowing what the Second Amendment says or allowing people to speak freely in the town square. But supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States is not just simply ensuring that the people have an exercise of their rights, but it's ensuring that government stays, the federal government stays in its limited and defined capacity by the Constitution, that it is not able to expand its power based on its own needs and its own definitions, that the federal government is limited and defined by the articles of the Constitution. And as the sheriff, he has a unique duty to go along with this unique authority to make sure that the federal government stays limited. Even the Supreme Court of the United States, as we will learn today, recognizes the unique position of the sheriff when in regard to the federal government. A unique position in that the sheriff's power is superior to the federal government within his jurisdiction. So we are going to talk about today the historical roots of the sheriff and his duty and role. Duty, we'll just say that again, to defy the federal government and to prevent the federal government from exercising undue and unconstitutional power over the members of his jurisdiction. Now, the people's expectations of the sheriff have changed over the centuries. And as I said, this change, this evolution of the role and the duty of the sheriff is very telling as to who the sheriff is today. The Anglo-Saxons divided their land into providences called shires. King Alfred the Great, who ruled from 849 to 899, allowed the counts of the shires to appoint deputies to administrate justice within the shires. These deputies were called reeves. And it's from this time that we get the word shire reeve or sheriff, as we know today. The reeve at this time was considered the representative of the royal authority in a shire, with the highest authority as the senior official under the crown. In the early 11th century, Great Britain would begin to use the shire reeves for the detection and prevention of crimes. And something even bigger. But before we get to the early 11th century, let's look at the shire reeve from the beginning. In the early days, the shire reeves provided the castle with ammunition and other provisions. They stocked and improved the king's manors. In short, the sheriff was the king's farmer or bailiff, and in collection of all his rents and revenues within his district. His duty was then, I suppose as it still is now, to support the justice of his country and to keep the public peace. The shire reeve was the first man in the country and superior in rank to all noblemen. He was not a hireling of the noblemen. The shire reeve also heard and determined all causes, not exceeding 40 shillings in value, in the county court. He was the county judge. He also had judicial power in civil cases. He executed warrants and processes. He proclaimed statutes, returned juries, and made return of writs for electing knights of the shire. Here's something that modern education doesn't want you to know. Women as well as men, were appointed to the office of sheriff, as well as archbishops and bishops. How is that? Women holding office way back in the day? I thought that women were just simply oppressed and abused by their chauvinistic husbands. And it's only since our modern day that women have been given the rights that they have based on the advancements of our modern day philosophies. We are the freer and liberator of women. See, if you teach this truth, then you're not going to be able to teach the lies. When, as a matter of fact, women held very important roles in government for a very long time. And women held these offices of sheriff. Now, I want to talk to you, when we come back from the break, about this amazing transition from the early sheriff to a new role for the sheriff. This new role of the sheriff comes to us from the Magna Carta of 1215. Clause 61 of the Magna Carta is an amazing transition from the early role of the sheriff in from beginning of the 600s to what we now understand, or should understand, as the role of the sheriff. I promise you, you will never look at your sheriff in the same way again. Once you hear how the Magna Carta changed the role of the sheriff.
KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Now, to understand some of the changes that the Magna Carta made, you have to understand a sort of progression of the British Constitution. The written form of the British Constitution, which they will call charters, because a constitution and a charter are different in a very, very important way. A charter is an agreement between the people and the sovereign government. That's why our Constitution is not called a charter, because our Constitution is not an agreement between the people and the federal government. Our Constitution is a compact between the states. And the problem with charters is when you make an agreement with the central authority, the federal authority, or the kingdom in this manner, then the king, as a party to that charter, can change the conditions of the charter. And that's one of the things that our framers suffered from the very beginning. The king just simply arbitrarily changing the conditions of their charters in the American colonies and leaving them with no real standard for government. It is one of the reasons why we struck out for independence, was the fact that there was no specific rule of law. The king just kept changing the conditions of their agreement based on the fact that he was king and he could do that. That's why we don't have a charter. We have a constitution, which is a compact between the states. And the first written part of the British Constitution, the Charter, the first charter to their Constitution was the 1100 Charter of Liberties, which is a promise from Henry I, a written promise on conditions under which the government can operate so that it won't operate in an illegal or oppressive manner. Now, that didn't hold up for very long. It was only 100 years before they have the most evil and oppressive king breaking just about every promise within the 1100 Charter of Liberties. His name is John. And the Magna Carta is the result of the rebellion against John's violation of the 1100 Charter of Liberties and the restoration of the liberties of the people. Now, the Magna Carta is an amazing document because unlike the 1100 Charter of Liberties, it's not a promise from the king. The Magna Carta is a demand from the people. It is a document written by the people to declare that their rights are inviolate, that their rights are to be protected by government, and that certain rights cannot be taken away. The Magna Carta establishes, as a matter of fact, a royal council, 25 men who will sit in the king's court, elected by the landowners of their territories, to represent the people in the king's court to make sure that the king is not violating their charter. So what we have now in 1215 is the very beginnings of real representative government. We have the landowners electing barons to sit in the royal council who have the authority to exercise a power over the king. No, this charter is an agreement between the people and the king. Mr. King, you don't have arbitrary power and full decisive measures over our charter. You must consult the other party to this charter, the people. So the purpose of the Royal Council is to enforce the limitations of the government established by the charter and to limit the power of the king. See, that's the unique nature of an Anglo-Saxon kingdom. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms are where the kingdoms are limited in their power. They're not your average Norman kingdom or stereotypical kingdom where the king says and you do or you die. So, we have now established this royal council. And interestingly enough, our 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th amendments in our Bill of Rights come from clauses 38 through 40 in the Magna Carta. But not only that, Clause 61 is an amazing clause. And it says, starts off by saying, since we have granted all these things for God, for the better ordering of our kingdom, and to allay the discord that has risen between us and our barons, and since we desire that they shall be enjoyed in their entirety, with lasting strength forever, we give and grant to the barons the following security. Listen up to the authority of the people over the king.
So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There is light on the other side. You'll see all the raindrops falling. It's a revolution.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
What are the securities granted to the barons by this charter with the king? It says the barons shall elect 25 of their number to keep and cause to be observed with all their might the peace and liberties granted and confirmed to them by this charter. Isn't that amazing? These barons now have an authority over the king by the permission of the king to keep the peace and the liberties with force. What is the purpose of these barons? And this is amazing. Clause 61 of the Magna Carta is also where we get the fifth aspect of our First Amendment. The right of the people to petition the government for a redress of our grievances. Listen, if we, our Chief Justice, our officials, or any of our servants offend in any respect against any man, or transgress any of the articles of the peace or of this security, and the offense is made known to 4 of the said 25 barons, they shall come to us, meaning the crown, or in our absence from the kingdom to the Chief Justice, and declare it, and claim immediate redress. We're petitioning the government for immediate redress when it offends the liberties and the security and the peace of the people. It says, if we, in our absence abroad, the Chief Justice, make no redress within 40 days, reckoning from the day on which the offense was declared to us or to him, the 4 barons shall refer the matter to the rest of the 25, who may distrain upon and assail us in every way possible. Did you catch that? If we do not address these grievances and make immediate redress within 40 days, the barons are by permission of the crown to assail in every way possible against the crown. What does that word assail mean? It means to make a concerted or violent attack on. I mean, I think that we really need to think about this. A king is telling, and the royalty of the land is telling the people that if we deny your liberties and we don't redress your grievances within 40 days, you have our permission to violently attack us. And then he says that, where is this now? May disdain and distrain upon or assail us in every way possible, with the support of the whole community of the land. How? What is the proper mechanism of the people to redress their grievances when the government will not? Seizing our castles, lands, possessions, or anything else saving only our person and those of the queen or our children, until they have secured such redress that they have determined upon. And having secured the redress, they may then resume their normal obedience to us. The representatives of the people determine the proper redress of the wrongs done by the crown to the people. If the crown does not appropriately remedy the situation, then the crown says you have our permission to rebel against us until proper redress is achieved. Do you see how big this is? And it's important that we understand this history so that we understand the proper application of this redress of grievances in our First Amendment. Perhaps, maybe, this would give us some better understanding of what both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson said. Jefferson said that this privilege of giving or withholding our monies is an important barrier against the undue exertion of prerogative, which left altogether without control may be exercised to our great oppression, and all history shows how efficacious is its intercession for the redress of grievances and reestablishment of the rights, and how improvident would be the surrender of so powerful a mediator. Jefferson, in a letter to Lord North explaining why they were they were refusing to pay the mandated taxes of the crown, says that withholding payment of taxes is a constitutional remedy to out-of-control government. Because this, in their Magna Carta, defined redress of grievances. This is not something invented in a vacuum. This is historically based. Their understanding of redress meant that they could do whatever was in their personal power and the authority of their legislators, the power and the authority of their legislators, to be made whole. George Washington wrote, "I think the Parliament of Great Britain hath no more right to put their hands into my pocket without my consent than I have to put my hands into yours for money. And this being already urged to them in a firm but decent manner by all the colonies, what reason is there to expect anything from their justice?" Their Constitution proclaimed that when the government refused to redress their grievances appropriately, that they are to distrain upon and assail the crown in every way possible with the support of the whole community of the land by seizing our castles, our lands, possessions, or anything else, saving our own persons and those of the queen and the children until they have secured such redress as they have determined upon. And then, having secured the redress, they may then resume their normal obedience to us. We'll just, go back to being the happy little family once everybody's happy again. Do you know what this means? That the Boston Tea Party was lawful according to Clause 61 of the Magna Carta. The boycott of federal taxes was lawful according to Clause 61 of the Magna Carta, their Constitution. The American Revolution was lawful based on the Magna Carta, Clause 61. It was them demanding a redress of their grievances when the government refused. Now watch this. Now that we've laid all this history and we know what a redress of grievance really means, let's look at this new role of the sheriff. Any man, and I'm reading now from the next paragraph of the Magna Carta, any man who so desires take an oath to obey the commands of the 25 barons for the achievement of these ends, and to join with them in assailing us to the utmost of his power. Did you catch that? This is the new role of the sheriff. The legislators, remember, the sheriff has an oath to the barons of the land, and the barons now create within the power of these sheriffs the power to join with the barons in assailing us to the utmost of his power. We give public and free permission to take this oath to any man who so desires. We're now deputizing people. And at no time will we prohibit any man from taking it. Indeed, we will compel any of our subjects who are unwilling to take it to swear it at our command. You see, your sheriff, being a representative of the people, since 1215, was charged with the duty to aid the people in the redress of their grievances against the central government. This is the birth of the constitutional sheriff. Not someone who is just simply a hireling of the crown, who is there to enforce the laws. No, this is a sheriff, by the text of Clause 61 of the Magna Carta, whose duty is to defy the law when the law transgresses the articles of the Magna Carta, the 1100 Charter of Liberty, transgresses the peace and the security of the people, when a law creates an offense against the people contrary to their constitution. It is now the duty of the sheriff to aid the people in the redress of their grievances. Your sheriff is supposed to be defying the federal government in the redress of your grievances. This is the history. This is who your sheriff is. This is who our framers expected the sheriff to be. We did not invent the sheriff with the Constitution. We invented the sheriff a long, long time ago. His duty is to protect the rights of the people from all unlawful acts, even when those unlawful acts are by the government itself. If the sheriff allows criminal acts to be perpetrated on the people, he is derelict in his duty for 900 years. Our sheriff takes an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The legislators of Virginia in 1799 called this oath a duty. Samuel Adams said, among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, life; secondly, liberty; third, property, together with the right to protect and defend them. And your sheriff ought to be first in that line of defense.
Hate me if you won't, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crank it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none, except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Our framers were very clear what they believed our rights to be and where they believed they came from. And by this, it should be very clear what the duty of the sheriff really is. First and foremost, his duty is to protect and defend the constitutionally established boundaries of the federal government, to preserve the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And we should expect, as they have expected for 900 years, that our sheriff, as much as he is able, will protect our homes, our property, our lives, our families from the acts of those who will violate those rights. But even when the government itself takes up the role, it has been the sheriff's role for 900 years to stand in the face of the government and say, no, not in my jurisdiction. Your sheriff has more power than your state legislator, has more power than your federal representatives, both House and Senate. Your sheriff has more power than the President of the United States in his jurisdiction. If the President of the United States comes to your county and violates the law, your sheriff can arrest the President, and he doesn't have to ask anyone's permission to do that. And James Madison said that is an essential check and balance on the power of government. He says, hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different government will control each other, and at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. The local or municipal authorities form a distinct and independent portions of supremacy. No more the subject within their respective authorities than the general authority is subject to them within its own sphere. What Madison is saying is, yes, the federal government has authority, but that only exists within their sphere of delegated power. When they operate unlawfully, they do not have supremacy. But that same supremacy exists in the local governments where they act within their delegated authority. It just so happens that the power delegated to the federal government is few and enumerated. And the power that remains locally is numerous and indefinite. Remember, Madison tells us that in Federalist 45. So when the federal government steps outside their sphere, their power is lost according to the father of the Constitution. The sheriff is the local protector of the people's rights, and in his sphere, he or she is superior to all persons acting contrary to the rights of the people, including the government itself. And in a Supreme Court opinion, Prinz Mac v. U.S., the Supreme Court of the United States, quoting James Madison, affirmed the sovereignty of America's sheriffs, declaring through the words of James Madison that your sheriff has a distinct jurisdiction that is supreme over the federal government. When the federal government is exercising a power they're not entitled to exercise. We need to understand this limited and defined nature of the federal government. We need to understand the proper role and duty of our sheriffs. We need to make sure that we are electing sheriffs that are committed to maintaining a constitutionally limited government. Sheriffs who are committed to defending your liberty. And we need to make sure that once elected, they will do that job and not use the excuse, I have to enforce the law. That excuse did not work in Nuremberg, and it should not work in a constitutional republic with liberty-loving people in America. God bless. See you tomorrow.
Something down if you get it